There are many people who have wondered about the Great Archon and its hierarchy. They may ask questions such as, within the bounds of this titanic force, where do the Ascended Masters and Reptilians stand in relation to other beings? Some may understand that the situation is complex and cannot be easily reduced to a simple good versus evil. However, they may seek to gain a deeper understanding of the nature of this force and its hierarchy. They may ask questions such as, are our primary adversaries human or alien in origin? Is this force predominantly composed of alien or human entities? And I must start by pointing out that the greatest realization possible for us is to finally discover for ourselves that the world is not simply divided into black and white, good and evil. In our quest to understand the forces that oppose us, it is all too easy to become lost in our search for some elusive truth that we believe is essential to our survival. We think that if we only knew this one thing, then we could finally conquer this world and our life situation. Unfortunately, sometimes knowing the truth of some things can be a bigger curse than anything else because such revelations, when they are truly taken seriously, can be so grandiose and overwhelming that they make us feel powerless. The curse of powerlessness is perhaps the greatest curse of all. Yet I understand the nature of your questions and your desire to know the full extent of what we are up against. If it is your wish to know so that you can gain the power and knowledge necessary to confront these foes, I must point out that we do indeed have the power to confront any such foes. We are not powerless. As such, I would highly recommend my book, Overcoming the Archon Through Alchemy. In this book, you will not only find great truths but also how to fight back and overcome these forces that seem so overwhelming when they are finally revealed to us. Now, from the perspective of inner alchemy, and I speak only from this perspective and do not presume to speak for others or their beliefs. From our perspective, the world is generally a predatory place. This means that we cannot rely on any group or individual, be they ascended masters or otherwise. The best course of action is to discover our own truth and learn to play a strategic game. This involves strengthening our position in the present by learning to see, to use our inner senses to perceive energy directly, and work with awareness and energy once these new senses have been perfected. When we have mastered this skill, we can begin to let go of the dogma and beliefs of the world, and instead focus on discovering our own truth, which may differ from that of others. This is why I always emphasize the importance of technique over dogma, in the hope that you will learn to see for yourself and discover your own path. Once we can perceive energy directly, we can see that there is no sanctuary for us except that which we create for ourselves. And yet, we are beings that are graceful, that is, we live in a state of grace. There are many ways to define what being in a state of grace means, but fundamentally in the context of this discussion, it means that we are multidimensional beings. I repeat, we are multidimensional beings, we are powerful, we are graceful. Some of us live entire lifetimes from beginning to end being told that we are nothing more than objects, meat machines, living in an object-filled world. We are basically told that we are a thing living amongst other things, and the nature of our multidimensional reality may be suspected, but it can never be fully confirmed. As such, people live lives of quiet desperation as they somehow try to get ahead using a very limited set of laws and powers that try to enforce the idea that they are just things, objects, surrounded in a world full of objects. But we are so much more than this. So we must never forget that we are multidimensional beings, that we are graceful. This basically means that even in this predatory place we have many inherent resources, and it is my hope to not just reveal the nature of reality to you, leaving you feeling powerless, but also giving you the techniques needed to overcome these challenges, and that is why I recommend the book I mentioned. So, getting to the root of your questions, there are indeed ascended masters, reptilian-like beings, as well as light beings and a host of other entities that fit within the greater structure of reality. However, it would be wrong to assume that these beings fight some kind of black and white battle with the good guys on one side and the bad guys on the other. The world is far more complicated than this, and even though from a certain perspective it is easier to see things this way, as your awareness expands you must begin to perceive greater nuance. This is a difficult point of view to understand, but the general idea here is that any force or any seeming entity or individual that is trying to tell you what to do, is in essence controlling you and is therefore something that has its own agenda. A true light being, let us say, or ascended master, will be very careful about putting different possibilities before you, hopefully positive possibilities, but will not, even in the gravest of issues, try to force your hand. Individual freedom and spontaneous personal and individual development are paramount in all things. The unfortunate truth is that even in suffering there is growth, as long as that experience is of an individual nature where that person realizes that all that they have done is the result of their focus of attention, their ability to work with energy. So, in that sense then, an ascended master would provide possibilities, teach technique or methodology that could be tried, but they would not force any kind of action, any kind of dogmatic position. Yes, it is the case that an ascended master might pull the curtain back to reveal a greater truth so that others might see for themselves the totality of all that is going on, but in the end they cannot force any issue because anything aside from this would mean that they are not in essence ascended masters but instead just forces with their own agenda. From this perspective, the ascended masters often described by many people are, in some ways, similar to the reptilians they also describe. Both ascended masters and reptilians have their own desires and motivations, their own agenda. Nothing is ever free in this world. It is up to each individual to decide whether to engage with these beings or to forge their own path. I will try to clarify what I mean here. Ascended masters are generally described as spiritually enlightened beings who have transcended the cycle of reincarnation on Earth. They are believed to have reached a higher plane of existence from which they can assist and guide humanity in its spiritual evolution. Some believe that these beings were once ordinary humans but, through a series of spiritual transformations known as initiations, they have achieved a state of enlightenment. Many in the esoteric field believe that ascended masters act as teachers and guides, helping individuals on their path towards enlightenment and aiding the human race in its destined evolution. Are such beings real? Yes, they are real, at least from the perspective of inner alchemy. I must emphasize that this is solely my viewpoint as an inner alchemist. It is my fervent hope that you will use the techniques I teach, or any other techniques that work for you, to discover your own truth. So, from my perspective as an inner alchemist, these beings do exist and there is even a hierarchy among them, and this is very important. This hierarchy is determined by the extent to which they are still interested in the earthly plane, that is, how much they are still invested in the material aspects of this earthly realm. Regrettably, I must resort to words to convey my meaning, and within the confines of language it is helpful to conceptualize the hierarchy of masters as a ladder of ascension, with each rung representing a higher level of detachment from the earthly realm. The higher one ascends, the less desire one has for the particular game that is being played here. The less interest one has on the board or the game pieces on the board, the higher the ascension in a way. I hope you understand what I am trying to say here. The hierarchy of ascended masters operates within a dynamic flow, striving to provide humanity with information and possibilities while remaining as detached from the game, like a multidimensional chessboard, as possible. Anything other than this would undermine their ascension, as it could easily devolve into a form of control. Thus, the hierarchy is a complex network of individuals who have ascended to varying degrees and who work towards expanding possibilities without interfering with humanity's free will. Those lower on the ladder of ascension are tasked with more direct contact with humanity. Through these interactions, they provide information and possibilities, sometimes revealing what lies behind the curtain while doing their utmost not to interfere with the overall game. This is a great challenge for an ascended master, and if they are able to fulfill their role effectively, that is, if they can provide enlightenment and possibilities without getting in the way or allowing any lingering attachment to the material board to influence their actions, then they themselves can ascend further. In their new, more elevated position, they will work on different aspects of our shared multidimensional reality. At the highest levels of ascension, these beings are responsible for the very essence of all that we perceive. Again, I must resort to words to convey this concept, which can be problematic, but you could think of these highly ascended masters as great composers or conductors who create the very essence and various aspects of the grand symphony that is our multidimensional reality. What are the reptilians? The term reptilians can hold various connotations, depending on the context in which it is employed. In one particular interpretation, reptilians are postulated to be an extraterrestrial species that came to Earth during the epoch of the ancient Sumerians. According to certain sources, these beings are from another planet or another dimension and journey to Earth, where they established their presence. It is said that they possess a cold and calculating nature, devoid of any human warmth or compassion. Their purported objective is to subjugate humanity and transform our species into a race of slaves, much like the numerous other civilizations they are believed to have conquered and oppressed. From the perspective of inner alchemy, beings of this nature do indeed exist. However, it is challenging to describe them accurately because just like ascended masters, there is a hierarchy to them. When people think of reptilians or similar beings, they often blend many different concepts. One of the greatest difficulties in attempting to describe these beings and their existence lies in reconciling individual perceptions of physicality and reality. Defining physicality is as challenging as trying to describe these beings. Generally speaking, we might say that physicality refers to something that can be perceived by our physical senses. Furthermore, our senses operate within a specific frequency range, so physicality could be said to encompass anything that exists within that frequency range. Finally, for something to be considered fully physical, it must be perceived consistently and equally. That is, more than one person must be able to perceive it, and that perception must be persistent. Those interested in this topic may wish to research the 100th monkey effect and morphogenic fields. Reptilians are real. They are as real as a table you might stub your toe on. But their true power lies in the fact that they are also multidimensional beings. But unlike humanity, they know the nature and the power of this multidimensionality, and they have the possibility of entering it fully, meaning that they can seemingly be physical at times while other times being non-physical. At certain points in space and time, they may meet all the criteria for physicality mentioned above. At other times, they may not. To try to convey this concept, I have used the metaphor of a game board with many different forces competing against one another. I have also introduced the idea of a hierarchy, where proximity to the board and attachment to its material aspects determine one's position within the hierarchy. We humans tend to view ourselves as bound to the board, mere pieces in the game. Yet as I have stated, we are actually in a state of grace. We are graceful beings, as multidimensional as any of the other actors on the board. Our problem lies in our inability to see ourselves as anything other than pawns when in reality we are so much more. Humanity at the moment is just barely beginning to understand the first 3 dimensions of the board, and some might say that they are also just beginning to understand the 4th dimension, which we could define as time. And yet there are so many more dimensions to work with, and it is within these dimensions that the true battle lies for us, and it is within these higher dimensions where true freedom and power are also accessible. To try to understand reptilians and ascended masters, we must realize that there are additional dimensions to this board. And while entities that exist in dimensions beyond the 3rd may interact with the lower dimensions, they also have the ability to transcend them. Their power is defined by the number of dimensions they can traverse. Just as I described the ascension of the masters, there are also other forces that ascend alongside them. Some of these forces may be considered benevolent, while others may be perceived as malevolent. The difficulty with words comes when we, for example, imagine that ascension means goodness from the perspective of humanity. But ascension, at least within the context of this video, means expansion of awareness and the ability to move beyond the 3rd dimension. As more dimensions are perceivable and as you are able to work within those higher dimensions, an expansion of awareness happens. Some forces and beings use that expanded awareness in a certain manner while others use it in a different way. Some beings look for expansion while other beings look for constriction. There must be balance, and the nature of that balance is dependent upon the dimensions that you are bound to. Another way to say this would be to say that the nature of those balancing forces is directly related to what dimension you happen to find yourself in. This is a complex game with many dimensions. At its highest levels, there are entities and beings that look down upon this little board and laugh. There are even higher forces that do not perceive the board at all and may inadvertently step on it, much as we might step on ants as we cross the street. This is a challenging topic for people to understand, and I apologize if my bluntness at times seems cold. However, in revealing what lies behind the curtain, it is important for me to make certain points as clear as possible. But in saying all this, please remember what I said earlier: we are not mere pawns on a board. We are truly multidimensional beings ourselves, and our task at this moment is to work with awareness and energy in order to ascend to higher dimensional frequencies. But again, this is just one way of describing this concept using words. Words can be misleading if taken too rigidly, and it is my responsibility to always remind you of this. You have been given possibilities, use them wisely. As you know, I have barely touched on this topic of Ascended Masters, Reptilians, and all the other forces that are participating in this multidimensional game. If this is a topic that you find interesting and you want me to go into it further, in much greater detail, then let me know by hitting the like button. If you can, please comment and I will use your comment questions for future videos.